agenda for this evening. The focus will be between 6:30 and 7:15. The focus will be on presentations. From 6:30 to 7, we have some special guests from the Green Mountain National Forest, as well as the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, formerly RASTA, who will be here talking about backcountry zone monitoring and management. That'll be between 6:30 and 7. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A. We'll be keeping an eye on the Zoom chat during the Q&A, as well as on the YouTube chat. So when we get to that Q&A, I'll let you know, and we'll try to get your questions to our presenters. And then from 7 to 7:15, we'll be doing MRVBC. We'll be providing a recap of 2021 and our goals for 2022. And then at 7:15, we're going to switch to the annual business meeting, at which point the YouTube live stream will be ending. And at that point, we will get into the business meeting. So let's continue right here. So backcountry zone management. We have two guests that I'd like to introduce. We have Jeremy Mears from the Green Mountain National Forest. He's a biologist with the Green Mountain National Forest, and he has been working. One of the things that he's been working on is, and his colleagues have been collecting information in the Brandon Gap and Chittenden Brook areas, collecting information about flora and fauna to help understand the potential impacts of the backcountry zones in that area. He'll be presenting on that. We also have Greg White from the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, president from the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, who will be here also, and we'll speak a little bit after Jeremy's presentation about ROC's perspective and their approach to management. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Jeremy, I would ask that you then you can go ahead and share yours.
All right, I'll give it a try.
Great.
You can see it?
I can see it, and I'm going to mute myself now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, hi, my name is Jeremy Mears. I'm the district biologist for the Rochester and Middlebury Ranger Districts. I'm here to talk to you today about the work we've been doing in Brandon and Chittenden Brook and Brandon Gap, trying to figure out what's going on with the backcountry ski zones and the proposed backcountry ski zones. My information's on the screen right now. If you have any questions after, please feel free to reach out. That's my actual cell phone, so limited to times that are reasonable. But yeah, so I'll just get on with it. No, hold on. So what got us here? So there are two projects that really led to the monitoring in Brandon Gap. The first was the trial backcountry ski zone project that was signed in 2015 and really implemented after that and is fully implemented now. That's the Brandon backcountry ski zones. The three areas, Goshen, Bear Brook, and No Name. It's about 200 acres of backcountry skiing. That project went through. People saw that. The public had some concerns about what the effects of that backcountry use was. So when we moved to the next project, which was the Robinson IRP Integrated Resource Project that was signed in 2018 and had a proposed new backcountry ski area in Chittenden Brook, members of the public asked us to monitor what effects could potentially be happening as a result of the backcountry skiing before we actually implement those projects. The Chittenden Brook projects did stay in the decision document, so they are still NEPA'd. They just have not been implemented pending the outcomes of this work. So this is roughly the area. I apologize for the terrible map. I am not a GIS map person. I go to documents and steal maps from other folks. So what you can see here on the left is the existing Brandon Gap ski zones. They're in yellow. Like I said, these are fully implemented. This is a project that is no additional work is happening here. If you look on the right side of the screen, you see the purple areas, which are the proposed ski zones that are in Chittenden Brook. These equal something in the neighborhood of 250 acres that could be potentially developed as we move forward. So the stated objective of the project, we had to, in the NEPA decision for Robinson, we added monitoring to the NEPA, so we have to monitor. We are statutorily required to monitor. And the objective was to monitor moose and black bear abundance and evaluate the potential impacts to these species from backcountry ski area management and use. And specifically, we're looking at what's happened at Brandon Gap, using Chittenden Brook as a control, and then thinking about what that means for Chittenden Brook moving forward. Additionally, with this, I added another control site, but it'll be explained better as I move forward through the slides. As we drill down into that a little closer, the goals of the study were to compile statistics on moose, create relative abundance indices, and do the same thing for black bear. Then compare the information we have from Brandon Gap to Chittenden Brook, because we're also collecting camera data there. And I also created an off-trail camera transect in Brandon Gap to complement the on-trail, so we had more areas to look at to compare. And finally, the piece was to use the information we get to think about how we move forward with Chittenden. So the areas highlighted in red, obviously the same terrible map I used before, but this gives you an idea of where my sample areas were from 2017 till 2020. And I should say that we're continuing to keep this monitoring going for the foreseeable future. It's just a really great wealth of knowledge to think about what's going on in relation to these activities. So as far as my staff time, I'm pretty much considering this is a project we're going to keep going with for the foreseeable future until there's a reason to stop. So the piece on the left, that is the sample area that's an off-trail sample area in Brandon Gap. The yellow area that's circled, that's the no-name ski zone. That's where we had cameras on the trails. And obviously the purple area that's circled down on the right, that's the furthest west Chittenden Brook proposed ski zone areas. To think about the sampling we did camera trap transect sampling. So we had 18 cameras total in the 3 areas. Each sample area has 6 cameras placed at an elevational gradient going from the highest point in the transect at 200-foot intervals going down the slope. And at some areas we did replicates to kind of see what we're missing with those cameras to get an idea of error. We also randomized the direction the cameras are facing within those areas so that we're not getting effects of bias of where we're looking. Sample period is the entire year. These cameras are out all year round. My staff and myself go out on a somewhat of a schedule, basically weather dependent, and swap cards, batteries, bring the data back, and start crunching numbers. As of right now, the 2017 to 2021 or to 2020 has been analyzed. There's more data to add to this data set. It's just a matter of time to put it all together. So in terms of what we found, we're seeing a lot of really interesting information about all the species we get up in Brandon Gap and Chittenden Brook. Moose and black bear are the 2 species we're interested in. They are not the most abundant species we run into. That's by far white-tailed deer that use those areas heavily. But we get a lot of information on other species that are using not only the areas that aren't currently ski zones, but the ski zones too. So other species are also using them. We haven't crunched those numbers, but other things to look at as we move forward. And again, moose we got 40, black bear we got 40. So we don't have a lot of detections, but what we do have is detections at almost every camera in the sample area. So I calculated something called realized occupancy, which basically means how many cameras did the species of interest show up in. And for black bear, it was about 80% of the cameras detected black bear, and for moose, it was about 89%. So they're really found throughout the sample area. To drill down into the numbers a little more closely, we can focus on moose. And what this is all years data, 2017 to 2020, a total sample collection of 40 for moose, and looking at what months of the year that species was detected. And what we begin to see is that there's some seasonality to when we're finding moose. Kind of an important thing to think about with the January and February samples are that these were actually detections in periods of low snow. We don't tend to see moose moving on the landscape when there's a lot of snow on the ground. They're just not moving around. Occasionally we'll see areas where they've really bedded in hard in the woods, but we just don't see them moving actively throughout the deep snow areas in Brandon Gap and Chittenden Brook. So we have the same information for bear, and you can see the same seasonality. Obviously, bear are dormant for a large portion of the time when skiing is active. We expected this. This isn't a surprise in any way, shape, or form. As climate change move forward, we might see some more of the shoulders increase some, but we see strong seasonal use that really suggests that it's obviously the non-snow periods or the deep snow periods that we're just not seeing the bear out there. What we can do now is take the skier numbers. So this is the data of skier use in the no-name ski zones. And it's for the 3 years of that we actually recorded data there. So 2018, 2019, and 2020. Over those 3 years, there were 1,756 detections of skiers in that particular ski zone. Some skiers can get double counted in this, so that number is likely a little higher than what is actually there. But it gives you an idea of when the use is, when we're seeing the heaviest use in the ski zones, which is, really end of January through February to March, we see a lot of activity. And then by April, we're pretty much done. There's a few stragglers that come through. You see people skiing the hard pack, but in general, after the powder's gone, you don't see a lot of activity. Same happens for November, December. We just see a real decrease in the number of people who are using it. This is skier specific. This isn't all people. So you'll see a smattering of other folks using the ski lines and off-country trail areas as well, which, we have hunters, we have hikers. Hunters actually have popped up a lot in the ski zones in recent images. So if we take the moose, black bear, and skier information and put that together in one graph, we can kind of think about when we have the highest number of skiers and when we have the highest number of detections of moose and black bear in our areas. And what we see again is that strong seasonal difference. One of our concerns is the movement of, are we seeing skiers push animals out of our areas of concern? And if you look at that, you could interpret it that way looking at this graph, but the reason we chose the other two control areas that were not ski zones were to look at to see if we had the same seasonal patterns, suggesting that we see this pattern in all areas, not just the ski zones. And if we drill down into the data, I know this is a lot of numbers on the next screen, and I'll just explain it. You don't have to look through them all.
Okay, bear with us here a second. Looks like Jeremy's just cut out for a bit. Greg, I see that you're still on, and obviously Jeremy hasn't finished his presentation. But while we wait to see if Jeremy can reconnect, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit.
And please introduce yourself again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Greg White. I'm the current president of Ridgeline Outdoor Collective. I've been with the club since its inception and was heavily involved in putting in the ski lines in Brandon Gap, and I'm heavily involved in maintaining them over the years. So I spend probably, we do about 300 to 400 hours of maintenance every late summer into November up on the lines, mostly, removing blowdowns and dealing with hobbleweed, which can choke out a trail. In 3 years, it grows back at an incredible rate. So we're up there a lot. And then I probably get 50, 60 ski days up there, since I only live about 5 miles from the Gap. So a lot of time spent up there. And anecdotally, I would say that in particular in the fall, we've seen, sort of echoed what Jeremy found with the cameras, a lot of wildlife movement, in particular bears. Bears have been super active when we're up doing maintenance. See bear sign, couple spottings, and an occasional moose. That's mostly in the October-November timeframe. So the good news is they do tend to use we call them lines or the glades as travel spots to move around. And then in the winter, obviously, as Jeremy showed, we see less movement, mostly moose and occasional moose. You'll see tracked up one of the ski lines or up the skin track. So again, I don't know if Jeremy's conclusion is going to get to this point. It doesn't just seem to have had a huge impact on both the moose and bear populations in the area. And as Jeremy said, in particular, the last 3 or 4 years, if the snow is good, it's getting a lot of use. There's a lot of people in there, in particular on weekends. There obviously is some stress to the extent there are animals in the area, but again, don't see a lot of tracks, in the heart of ski season, which up there is typically from now through middle of March. That's what we found in our time up there. The habitat up there is constantly changing. I think another concern was opening up the canopy. Would that change the flora and fauna on the understory? Okay.
I think Jeremy's back, but I don't want to interrupt what you're saying.
Oh, no, that's all right. Yeah, the only other comment and concern, and I don't know if Jeremy's going to speak to this aspect of it, was changing the understory, and in particular concerns about fern growth and things like that. And we've seen a little bit of that in some of the areas, but for the most part, it's mostly hobbleweed.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And I'm not going to speak to the flora tonight. We're going to stick with fauna, but we are continuing to collect vegetation data as a continuation of a university study that was there. And Greg's spot on. There is some conversion to fern, but I think the large concerns aren't panning out as much as the hobble bush really dominates that landscape. It's amazing how quickly that area revegetates if it's not actively managed. So I'm going to try to jump back into my presentation real quick. Hopefully it works and I don't disappear again. Can you see it now? All right.
Yes.
So I'd pretty much gotten through this, which was to say that we're not seeing a lot of seasonal difference between Chittenden Brook, which is a control, Brandon Gap off trail, which is a control, and Brandon Gap on trail. We're seeing similar patterns of usage of both moose and black bear throughout the year. What's interesting is that the off trail camera site is actually the one where we're seeing the fewest number of animals. So, as we're creating these feeding lanes up the mountain, we're seeing a lot of ungulates, moose, deer really heavily browsing these areas, probably contributing to the, maybe saving some gas in terms of the trimmers as they move up the hill. All right.
Thumbs up.
So, again, this is just going to break down what I said before. There's strong seasonal separation between when skiers are using the mountain and when moose and black bear are active. There are no apparent declines in moose or black bear in the ski zones. There seems to be random patterns and fluctuations in the numbers, but nothing suggests, a steady decline in numbers. Again, we've been looking at this for 4 years. As we look at it for more, we may detect a pattern, but as it stands now, it looks very random in terms of the numbers we're detecting. I think Greg was speaking to this. When the snow's there, these areas are incredibly popular. We see thousands of users using these places annually. Like I said, 1,756 detections in that one line on the no-name zone alone. So you can kind of expand that to the 3 different areas because, there's a lot of people up there. And what goes, when people see the dogs, I know they're going to get worried, but what I do see a lot of with the skiers is people with dogs off leash. So I think it's worth bringing it up, and it's something I'm going to, look at more closely. We have no evidence that there's dogs harassing wildlife on the mountain, and I'm not suggesting that. All I'm saying is that we see thousands of skiers up there, and hundreds of dogs. So white-tailed deer is the most abundant wildlife species we have up there. The 2 most abundant detections we have are humans and dogs. Those are really what we're getting most of on our cameras, other than really snowy nights that show up on the cameras too when they trick the motion sensors. So, what do we do moving forward? Well, oh, I forgot. Yeah, I almost went through the whole thing without showing any pictures of moose or other things we've detected. So this is an animal we picked up in Chittenden Brook, very healthy. We haven't seen in the images we've picked up in all of the areas, the animals tend to be in good condition. And this is just from, the next photos are just from one site, and you can see how many different species are using one particular zone. This is one camera's trapping sample period, which is about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. One site, multiple species over the course of over that sample period. So we're seeing lots of critters out there. This is Chittenden Brook. We see similar results in Brandon Gap. So nothing to suggest that things are moving away. In fact, we're seeing kind of the opposite. We're seeing more animals using particularly in the shoulder seasons when there's a snowpack in Brandon Gap. Animals are using that hard pack to move up and down through the forest because it's essentially an easy path to move through the area. So what we plan to do moving forward is continuing monitoring in all 3 sample areas. Like I said, I want to keep doing this for the foreseeable future because it's a wealth of knowledge to think about what the impacts from skiing are and how we continue to develop backcountry skiing. It's something that's not going away, and people love it. So we want to continue to support that activity and do our due diligence to make sure that we're keeping an eye out for any potential negative impacts. The next 3 points, 2 through 5, are recommendations I've put to our line officer, the district ranger, Chris Matrick. These are not set in stone. These are things that we're discussing as part of moving forward with the proposed Chittenden Brook trail development. And my first recommendation was to use a staggered approach to developing the ski zone. So there are, I believe, 6 areas that are proposed in Chittenden Brook. What I've told Chris as my recommendation is to develop a couple of these that are the furthest from the road that will probably get the least amount of activity because they require the most effort to get to them. And then we'll continue to monitor that for effects. There's a substantial amount of timber harvest in that area too. So myself, I'm a little gun shy about all of the activity that's going on in there, not putting too many stressors on the ground. As we go forward with building those ski zones, trying to keep an eye on fragmentation. So where we can, keep ski zones compact, keep them compact, meaning, not separate trails for up tracks, and trying not to leave little islands of isolated trees in and amongst the ski zones, just because you're creating fragmented pockets. 4 kind of hits on 3, and we're back to dogs. And again, the only recommendation I made to Chris for dogs was that we talk to user groups like yourself to let users know that, there is a concern bringing dogs off leash into the backcountry. There's a potential for wildlife harassment. Just think about those things when you go out there and you're with your pup, that there is that potential. And if you have the kind of dog that chases, don't bring them. So that's what we have. That's what I have for recommendations. I have a more formal document I put together for the forest, and I'm happy to share that with folks. Just reach out to me and I'll give you that, and I'll send you that information. And with that, I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Sure.
Appreciate it. We have running a little bit behind, but we do have a few minutes here available for folks with questions. If you're connected to Zoom, you can punch in a question in the chat box. If you're connected to Zoom, you can also unmute yourself. We'll have to be a little bit disciplined about how many people unmute themselves at one time. So either way, if you're connected through YouTube live stream, you can also put your questions in there, and we'll try to get them as best we can. Anyone on Zoom with questions? I see one here, Jeremy. Do you have any concerns over the other wild animals being disturbed by skiers?
I have seen no indication that we're seeing direct harassment of other animals by skiers. My biggest concerns currently as we move forward with developing areas would be making sure that we're choosing sites that don't impact like deer wintering areas or softwood stands that are important to moose and other species, and and bear denning sites. But I don't see any direct evidence of wildlife being harassed by the skiing.
Looks like a few other questions here. Does the Forest Service have any data from old abandoned ski areas regarding change of vegetation after abandonment?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure it's been looked at, but I don't have a study in particular that I could point to. I think we have a lot of evidence as we see old logging roads convert back to forested, as well as timber stands, what that looks like. And I think it's kind of different here because there's an active management to keep the ski zones open. So folks are going in there with brush saws to keep the stuff down. So that does have an effect on what kind of community we keep in the ski zones. So, I mean, it's something we'll certainly look at as we move forward with the flora study and the flora information, but I can't point to anything right now.
There's another one here. Why were the 2019 animal sightings so much higher than other years?
Great question, and it's really hard to tell. There's always variation in animal behavior, and to think that things are going to move in a linear pattern it's really difficult because there's variation in natural systems. The camera traps were set in the same locations. Everything else, it's a natural experiment. There's a lot of variability. So, and I don't think it was snowpack. I think the snowpack explains the shoulder seasons, but in general, all years we had a decent snowpack through January, February, March, with the exception of maybe 2018. I think there was a low snow period in 2018, but I really can't explain the difference in numbers. It wasn't as a result of experimental error or loss of camera data, as far as I know.
Okay. Let's do two more. I see one in here. Jeremy, you mentioned key areas that should be avoided, and I heard deer yards and dense softwood stands. Are there more places to avoid?
So those are the key habitat features we're going to run into up there. As we move higher in elevation, we transition from a northern hardwood forest, which is your lower areas, your maple beech dominated forest, to a spruce fir dominated forest. And in spots where we have dense clusters of stand, we know those are important deer wintering areas. So those are the kind of places we'll avoid. There's also wet areas that open earlier than other areas and are the first places where vegetation comes up. So as we move forward, not so much a problem in Brandon Gap, but looking at Chittenden Brook, there are more of those areas that tend to hold water. So we'll try to avoid places that we know are important to animals.
Okay. I don't see any others in the Zoom chat here. I see Wendy, you're raising your hand. Would you like to ask a question? I think we'll take this as the last one.
Okay, Jeremy, I'm curious, are you keeping data on the snowpack of each of these years as well?
So I use SnowTel information from other sites in Vermont to think about snowpack. The way I've done it in the data set, because it's very hard to keep snow stakes at multiple sites standing. They get knocked over, bears rub on them, all sorts of things happen to them. They get destroyed essentially. So I've done a qualitative binary response, which is 1-0, basically saying, is this skiable? Is this deep snow you would ski on? Or are we dealing with something that's, maybe boot deep at most? So I did look at that, and I have thought about that. It's just really hard with the number of cameras we have in the landscape and the time frame we're doing the study over, which is essentially for the foreseeable future to maintain that. So I wish I could, but it's really hard.
Jeremy, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time to do the presentation. Greg, did you want to add anything else before we close out this presentation?
No, the only thing I'll add is we'll be working with the Forest Service. Obviously, we're somewhat anxious to get into Chittenden Brook and just to maybe relieve some of the stress at Brandon Gap. There's a high demand for backcountry skiing, but we're very cognizant of sort of what we have to deal with in the Chittenden Brook area. Not only the things that Jeremy mentioned, but as he mentioned, also there's a lot of logging going on in there. So the timing of when and where to go will somewhat be driven by when they're logging certain areas. So, but yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to work with the Forest Service. They've been great in working with us in developing both Brandon Gap and Chittenden Brook, as well as the club's mountain bike trails.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out one more thing in that, I haven't dealt with Greg directly. I've been trying to stay as the biologist role and let Chris speak between groups. But I'll say now, one of the things in my proposal to Chris was to say I'd like to work directly with you all when you go out there to help you get those, to get the best possible outcome in the proposed Chittenden Brook ski areas.
Absolutely.
Well, Greg, Jeremy, thanks again. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. Appreciate you sharing this information with us. I think this is very valuable information as the backcountry ski community here in Vermont and throughout New England, really goes through an evolution and maturation as we mature and learn more. It's important that we learn from each other, and we appreciate your willingness to share with us. So with that being said, I think we're going to transition here to a presentation from MRVBC. Certainly, Greg, Jeremy, you're welcome to hang on if you're interested, but thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Bear with me one second. I'm going to switch over. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Very good. So, Wendy, maybe give me a thumbs up if you can hear me and you can see the screen. Okay, very good. Thank you. So let me introduce myself again. I'm Steve Sharp. I'm a member of the board of directors with the Mad River Valley Backcountry Coalition. Last year, I was in the role of president. And so I'm going to provide a quick little recap here of 2021 and our goals for 2022. I'm going to sort of zip along through this presentation here, and then we're going to make a transition into our business meeting, at which point our live stream will end. So it was a busy year, lots of things going on. We hosted 2 tours last winter, meaning the winter of 2021, really. As most of us know, in most cases, the backcountry conditions really don't come in until the end of January, February, March. We had 2 tours, one in Fenn Basin and one in Lincoln Gap. Both of these areas are unmanaged backcountry skiing, so what we like to call raw Vermont backcountry. So it comes with all the fun and many of the challenges that come with unmanaged backcountry terrain. So areas where you can find some real open tree skiing, and other areas where you're finding quite a bit of schwacky skiing. So always having fun. This picture here is on the Lincoln Gap tour. This is near the around the Sunset Rock area. Last year, we hosted 2 wilderness first aid classes by an instructor, a solo instructor. We had the good fortune of partnering with Mad River Glen, who provided us with the facility. This was both in September and October. So we were pleased to be able to make that an offering for folks in the region. We also had a photo contest last year, reaching out to folks actually in the whole New England area, where we asked folks to provide us with pictures of their adventures in their what we called backyard backcountry. So we got some great photos. We ended up with some winners. We had a first, second, and third prize and some really nice prizes. And we are actually going to be doing that again this year. Any day now, we'll be putting out an announcement about that. So keep an eye out for that. Outreach is always an important part of what we do, an important part of our mission. We put out 4 newsletters last year. We try to do a quarterly newsletter. So we do a winter and a spring, a summer and a fall. We also use Facebook and Instagram to reach out to the community as well and to communicate either events that we're having or communicate things about backcountry safety, about backcountry etiquette, about paying attention to ski area uphill policies, all those kinds of things. We also partnered with the Big Picture Theater in Waitsfield and with the Catamount Trail Association, which the Catamount Trails Association is our parent organization, to host the Backcountry Film Festival, a film festival that's done every year by the Winter Wildlands Alliance. So we pay a fee to the Winter Wildlands Alliance, which helps to support their programs. And the proceeds from the tickets that we sold for that event, which was a live event at the Big Picture Theater, the funds from that went to support the Catamount Trail Association's youth program. We also hosted the Earn Your Turns Roundtable. This was the 3rd annual Earn Your Turns Roundtable. This roundtable was focused on conversation with some panelists from the state of Vermont, Forest Parks and Recreation, a scientist from a private research firm, and as well as the executive director, Matt Williams from the Catamount Trail Association, and very interesting conversation about all the things that have to be considered when siting backcountry zones. We also produced some new hats. So we got some new designs, new colors. You can check it out. Go to MRVBC.org and go to our store there, and you can order them all online. We also had a trail day out on the trail. MRVBC does not currently have any managed backcountry zones, but we do maintain a section of the Catamount Trail, section 19 South, in the Mad River Valley. So we did get out there this fall and do some regular trail maintenance. So in terms of backcountry zones, that is an area where we continue to engage with state, town, and private landowners in an effort to establish some managed backcountry zones within the Mad River Valley, and in some areas potentially adjacent to the Mad River Valley. So we don't have a hard definition as to exactly where that line is, but more or less the Mad River Valley watershed, plus or minus. So we've continued to engage with the state of Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation. They just released their camel stump management plan. It does provide for some opportunities for us, albeit in some cases they are limited, but we do believe that there are some real opportunities, and we continue to engage with them and continue to meet with them to work towards having some established zones within the Mad River Valley and areas within state land. There are a few areas on town forests that have some potential, and so we continue to engage in conversations there. For example, in Facein, there's the Boyce Hill Town Forest. That's an area that's going through a process of planning for recreational use, and one of the things that we're interested in is in the possibility of maintaining some open areas there for skiing. So what do we want to try to accomplish in 2022? Well, we want to continue to retain and grow our membership. We'll see in the once we get in the business meeting. We're over 100 members now, and we'd like that to continue to grow. We like to continue to stimulate conversations like we have been doing, like the presentation we saw tonight from Green Mountain National Forest and Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, or the kinds of conversations we saw at the Earn Returns Roundtable. We want to stimulate the conversations about the future of Vermont backcountry skiing in the valley and beyond. We also want to make sure we're having those conversations about backcountry safety and backcountry etiquette, respecting those uphill policies at ski areas, all of that. Continue with our outreach efforts. Continue to host tours. We will have 2 tours that we have coming up. I think they might be full at this point, but we have 2 tours going this winter. Wilderness First Aid, and we're thinking about possibly seeing if we could host an avalanche class here in the valley as well. CTA trail maintenance, that's an ongoing responsibility that we have along a certain section. And in backcountry zones, continue to make our efforts to establish some zones here in the valley. So, that being said, I should not forget to mention our annual sponsors. A big thank you to Jameson Insurance, Lawson's Finest Liquids, Onion River Outdoors, Mad River Glen, Clearwater Sports, and Broadleaf Landscape Architecture. They've been steadfast supporters of MRVBC for many years. We thank them for their ongoing support. Our executive committee in 2021 consisted of the following individuals, including as well at-large board members and an advisory committee with some folks who brought real experience that we can turn to when we need it. How can you help us? Well, number one way is to become a member of the Catamount Trail Association and to tag MRVBC as your local chapter. We do get a portion of those proceeds, and your support is greatly appreciated. We are also always looking for folks who have the time, interest, and ability to commit to engaging as a board member. So if that is something where you think you can make the time commitment, you should please feel free to reach out to us. So at this point, we're going to transition into our business meeting, which essentially means that we're going to stop live streaming on YouTube. So for those who joined us on the live stream on YouTube, thank you for joining us.